They said I wasn't family anymore until they needed me to save the business I now owned, and I finally had the power they once denied me. They told me I wasn't family anymore. Those exact words came out of my father's mouth the day he rewrote the will. I remember the sting in my chest, like someone had carved a hollow inside me. My siblings didn't even look surprised. In fact, they looked relieved. I was 23, fresh out of college, and apparently too independent, too different to carry the family name. I had grown up inside the family business, a chain of boutique furniture stores my grandfather had started from a dusty workshop. I used to sweep the floors as a kid, then later handled inventory and eventually managed one of the branches. I thought I was building a future there. But when Grandpa passed away, the truth came out. At the reading of the will, my father announced, "You're not part of this family anymore. Don't expect anything." He said it without looking at me, as though I'd already been erased. The others, my brother Daniel, my sister Rosa, sat there smug, already calculating their shares. I walked out of that room with nothing but the clothes I wore and the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. But what none of them knew was that Grandpa had left me something private, something separate from the official inheritance. It wasn't until months later, after the lawyers settled everything, that I opened a sealed letter from him. Inside, there was a short note in his shaky handwriting. "The business should be yours. I trust you more than anyone." And attached, the controlling shares of the company. At first, I couldn't even believe it. The same business they said I didn't belong to was now mine. I didn't tell a soul, not even my closest friends. I worked silently with the management team, making decisions behind the scenes, while my family thought the company was still under Dad's leadership. Watching them treat me like an outsider, while unknowingly answering to me, was almost poetic. But life has a cruel sense of timing. 6 months later, the family business began to collapse. Bad investments, unpaid debts, reckless expansions. And that's when the same people who said I wasn't family anymore suddenly came knocking at my door. The call came late at night. My sister Rosa's voice, trembling yet urgent, "We need you." I almost laughed, but I held it back. For years, I had been invisible to them, the disappointment, the one not good enough. And now they were calling me like I was the only lifeline left. The next morning, I walked into the family's old office building. I hadn't been there since they pushed me out. The same photos of my father shaking hands with politicians, the same glossy plaques of Family Business of the Year hung on the walls. Except now, the paint was peeling, the reception desk was empty, and the energy was gone. Daniel, my brother, greeted me with a forced smile. "We may have misjudged you," he said, as if that was enough to erase years of cruelty. My father stayed seated behind the big mahogany desk, the same one Grandpa once used, only now it looked too large for him. He gestured at a pile of folders. "The banks are pulling out. If we don't find new funding, we're finished." I crossed my arms. "And what does this have to do with me?" Rosa jumped in quickly. "You've always been good with numbers, with strategy. Maybe you could help save the business." I finished her sentence. The words tasted strange in my mouth. These people had cut me off, disowned me, humiliated me in front of relatives and business partners. And now they wanted me to be their savior. I let the silence linger until my father finally looked up. For the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before: desperation. "I know you're angry," he muttered, "but this company is our legacy. Your legacy, too." That's when the irony hit me. My legacy? If only he knew the truth, that the shares, the control, the real ownership was already mine. And in that moment I realized this wasn't just about saving a company. This was about showing them who I had become without them. I leaned back in the chair across from my father and let him sweat. For the first time in my life, the balance of power had shifted. They were the ones begging, and I was the one listening. Daniel started explaining their mess: overextended credit lines, risky property expansions, unpaid suppliers. Rosa added something about angry investors threatening lawsuits. They painted the picture of a sinking ship, and honestly, it was worse than I thought. Finally, my father said the words I never expected from him: "We need you back in the family." I almost laughed. Back in the family? The same family that had cut me out like I was diseased? My heart raced, but I kept my face calm. "And what do I get in return?" Daniel bristled. "Get? You should be grateful we're even asking." Enough, my father snapped at him, then looked back at me. What do you want? That question echoed in my head. What did I want? For years, I had dreamed of hearing him admit he was wrong. I wanted respect, acknowledgement. But more than that, I wanted them to feel exactly what I had felt the day they told me I wasn't family. I stood up and walked toward the window, overlooking the city. Here's the thing, I said quietly. You don't need to bring me back into the family business. Rosa looked confused. What do you mean? I turned around slowly, meeting each of their eyes. Because it's already mine. The room froze. My father frowned as if I had spoken another language. Daniel laughed nervously. Rosa blinked like she hadn't heard right. I pulled a single envelope from my bag and placed it on the desk. Inside were the documents Grandpa had left me, the shares, the ownership papers, the letter in his handwriting. This company, I said, tapping the envelope, belongs to me. For the first time, none of them had anything to say. The silence in that office was thick enough to choke on. Daniel was the first to break it with a bitter laugh. This is some kind of joke, right? I didn't even blink. Do I look like I'm joking? Rosa reached for the envelope with shaking hands, pulling out the letter, the stamped documents, the signature of the family lawyer. Her face went pale. It's real, she whispered. My father's jaw tightened. He read the letter once, then again, slower this time. His hand trembled, though he tried to hide it. When he finally looked up, his eyes were hard. So this was Ernesto's doing. He couldn't even say Grandpa, just Ernesto, like a stranger. Yes, I said. He trusted me. And you didn't. Daniel slammed his hand on the desk. This is ridiculous. You, running the company? You don't have the experience, you don't have the vision. Funny, I cut in, that the company only started collapsing once you were in charge. He went red, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to scream, but couldn't find the words. Rosa stayed quiet, her eyes darting between us, as if searching for a way to calm the storm. My father leaned back in his chair, his voice low and cold. So what now? You want revenge. You want to watch this business die just to prove a point. I walked slowly back to the desk and leaned forward. No, I want to save it. Because unlike you, I actually care about what Grandpa built. They all stared at me, stunned. For the first time in years, I wasn't the outsider begging for a seat at the table. I was the one who owned the table, and they finally knew it. But deep inside, I also knew this wasn't just about contracts or percentages. This was about rewriting the history they tried to erase me from. And I was ready. The next days were a blur of board meetings, phone calls, and emergency negotiations. Word spread quickly through the company that the forgotten child was now the rightful owner. Some employees looked at me with cautious curiosity, others with open relief. They had seen the chaos under my father's and Daniel's leadership. On the third morning, I stood in front of the entire management team. My father and siblings sat stiffly at the back of the room, as if they couldn't believe they had to listen to me. I cleared my throat. I know you've been told I don't belong here, that I'm not part of the family. But the truth is, I've been here longer than most of you. I grew up in these stores. I swept these floors. And I'm not here to destroy what my grandfather built. I'm here to make sure it survives. The room was quiet, but I could see nods from some of the senior staff. A few even smiled, small but genuine. It was more support than I had ever received from my so-called family. After the meeting, Rosa cornered me in the hallway. Her voice was low, almost pleading. You can't just push us out. We're family. I looked at her for a long moment. Were we family when you voted to cut me out of the will? When you sat there and said nothing as Dad told me I wasn't one of you? She flinched, guilt flashing across her face. But before she could respond, Daniel stormed in. This is a power trip. You think you can embarrass us like this? Fine. Let's see how long you last when the banks pull the rug out from under you. I smiled calmly, though my heart raced. Already handled. They've agreed to restructure under my plan. Daniel froze. For once, he had no comeback. And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't just saving the company. I was dismantling the illusion they had lived in for years, the illusion that they didn't need me. The first real test came faster than I expected. A supplier we'd relied on for decades threatened to cut ties unless a six-figure debt was paid immediately. My father and Daniel panicked, suggesting we beg for extensions or sell off assets. I shook my head. Selling pieces of the company is what got us into this mess. We're not going to dismantle Grandpa's legacy to cover your mistakes. Instead, I called the supplier myself. The man on the other end had known me since I was a teenager stacking boxes in the warehouse. "You?" he asked, surprised. "I thought you were out of the picture." "Not anymore," I said firmly. "And I'm not here to run this place into the ground. I'm here to make it stronger. Give me 90 days, and you'll not only have your money, you'll have new orders on your desk." There was a long pause before he chuckled. "Your grandfather always said you had guts. Fine. 90 days. When I hung up, I caught my father staring at me. He looked smaller somehow. Maybe for the first time, he understood I wasn't the naive child he thought he could control. That night, as I walked out of the office, I passed the old workshop at the back of the building. The smell of sawdust and varnish still lingered, ghosts of my childhood hiding in the corners. I remembered Grandpa's voice telling me, "This place will always be your home if you treat it right." And for the first time in years, I actually felt it, not bitterness, not anger, but belonging. But the war with my family was far from over. Because the stronger I became, the more desperate they grew to claw back control. Daniel's desperation showed first. He barged into my office one morning, slamming a folder onto my desk. "These are proposals from investors who actually know what they're doing," he sneered. "Not whatever fantasy plan you think will work." I opened the folder and skimmed through. His investors were vultures offering quick cash in exchange for huge chunks of equity. They weren't here to save us. They were here to strip the company bare and walk away richer. I closed the folder slowly. You'd sell our grandfather's life's work for pennies just to prove me wrong. Daniel's jaw clenched. "At least I'm trying to keep us afloat." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "No, you're trying to keep your ego afloat. And if you can't see the difference, then you've already failed." He stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. Later that day, Rosa approached me quietly. Unlike Daniel, her voice carried more fear than anger. "He's not going to stop. He feels like you stole everything from him." I sighed. He never saw me as family anyway. What exactly did I steal? She didn't answer, and I realized she couldn't. Deep down, they all knew the truth. I hadn't stolen anything. I had earned it through Grandpa's trust, through years of being overlooked, through resilience they never imagined I had. Still, I wasn't naive. My siblings wouldn't just step aside. And I had a sinking feeling Daniel wasn't done making reckless moves. That night, as I left the office, a thought struck me. Saving the business was no longer just about honoring Grandpa. It was about survival, in every sense of the word. Because if Daniel's ambition didn't ruin the company, his hatred for me just might. I didn't have to wait long for Daniel's next move. A week later, I walked into a meeting with our biggest client only to find Daniel already there, pitching them a new direction without my knowledge. He was promising discounts we couldn't afford, delivery times we couldn't meet. The client glanced at me, confused. "So which plan are we supposed to trust? His or yours?" I kept my voice calm, even though my pulse thundered. "Mine, because I'm the owner. And I don't make promises I can't keep." Daniel's face turned crimson. "You think waving some papers makes you in charge?" I turned to the client, ignoring my brother's tantrum. "You'll have your orders on time, and the quality will be what you've always expected. That's my word." When the meeting ended, the client shook my hand and walked away with confidence. Daniel, on the other hand, lingered just long enough to spit out, "You'll regret this." Later that night, Rosa called me. Her voice was hushed. "He's planning something. He's been talking to outsiders about selling parts of the company behind your back." I clenched my jaw. Of course he was. Let him talk. But if he tries anything official, he'll be talking to my lawyers. There was a pause before Rosa whispered, "You sound just like Dad now. Cold. Unshakable." I almost laughed at the irony. "No, Rosa. The difference is, I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to save what's left of us." But even as I said it, I wondered, was there really anything left of us? Or was this family already gone the moment they told me I wasn't part of it? The breaking point came during a board meeting. I had gathered the senior managers to present our recovery plan, new marketing strategies, streamlined production, partnerships I'd personally secured. Everything was moving in the right direction. Then Daniel walked in late, dragging two strangers behind him. "These are our new investors," he announced smugly, as if the decision had already been made. I kept my voice even. "We don't have new investors. Not without my approval." One of the men smirked. "Your brother tells us you're in over your head. He says you're desperate." The managers shifted uncomfortably, all eyes turning to me. My father sat silent in the corner, watching like a man who had already chosen sides. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Let me make something very clear. This company isn't desperate, and it isn't for sale. If anyone here thinks otherwise, they're welcome to leave." Daniel's face twisted. "You can't just—" "I can," I cut him off, pulling a folder from my bag. "Because unlike you, I have the documents that prove who owns this business. I am the majority shareholder. And your little stunt, it's over." The investors exchanged glances, muttered something under their breath, and walked out. The room was silent again, but this time it was different. For the first time, I saw respect in the manager's eyes. Daniel shoved his chair back and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. My father followed him, but not before giving me one last, unreadable look. I sat back down, exhaling slowly. The battle wasn't won yet, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was leading. Still, I couldn't shake the question gnawing at me. How far would Daniel go now that brute force hadn't worked? Daniel answered that question only days later. He tried to force an emergency vote with a handful of minor shareholders, claiming I was unfit to lead. It was desperate, sloppy, and reckless, but was also dangerous. I walked into that meeting ready. I had the numbers, the contracts, the letters of support from clients who'd returned because of me. I laid everything out with calm precision. When Daniel tried to interrupt, the chairman of the board silenced him with a sharp, "Let her finish." By the time I was done, the vote wasn't even close. 90% stood with me. Daniel was stripped of any remaining authority. He stormed out for the last time, spitting my name like it was poison. My father followed him, his face gray with defeat. Only Rosa lingered, her eyes glossy. "You really did it," she whispered. "You saved us." I shook my head. "No, Rosa. I saved the company. The family? That's up to you." When the room emptied, I stayed behind, staring at the old company logo etched into the glass wall. Grandpa's dream. My inheritance. My future. I thought about the day they told me I wasn't family anymore, how small and unwanted I had felt. And now here I was, the owner, the leader, the one who carried it forward. I didn't feel revenge. I didn't feel pity. I felt something far stronger. Freedom. For the first time, I was no longer the outcast. I was exactly where I belonged, not because they let me in, but because I claimed it for myself. And I knew Grandpa would be proud.